and use the news or the recent event or something that happened with a professional athlete if you have a kid that's into sports. But look for those kind of opportunities from society as springboards for conversations with your children, as openers. When we need to have tough conversations, very important to think them through. Very, very often in my private practice, I'll encounter parents who are otherwise healthy, great parents, but are having a tough time with a certain situation because really they need to sit down with their kid and have a tough conversation. Maybe it's a topic that's challenging, maybe it's a topic that's just challenging personally to that parent. And so one of the best things that we could do for ourselves is to prepare ourselves, to think it through, to take a proactive position. Think it through in advance. What are the questions that I need to ask my kid? What are the questions that my kid is going to ask me? What do I need to do to make this conversation go well? When would be a good time for everybody involved to sit down together and have this conversation? And the more planning that we do in taking this approach, the more likely the conversation will be fruitful. Be proactive in setting expectations together. So here's where I want to introduce you to the 4 C's. Clear, consistent, completion, and compassionate. So clear means that we need to set expectations for our children that are very, very clear, that are explicit, concrete, understandable. Our kids need to know what we expect from them. Reinforce the family rules, write them down. Ask others what they understand the expectations are. Check in with your own kids, make sure that they understand what you guys want from them. Discuss why there's an expectation, especially with our older children. The older our children get, the more ineffective or unhelpful the "because I said so" is. And they deserve more than just a "because I said so." If we're trying to raise them in a certain way, we have certain expectations for them in our family, and we have good reason for those expectations, then they deserve to understand that, and it will help them. The next C is consistent. Be fair in how we set our expectations, how we monitor them, and how we enforce them. So for example, if there's a rule that kids can't play, when we're talking about, hopefully with the older kids anyway, that the kids can't play with cell phones or text during meals, then adults shouldn't be allowed to do that either. We should be consistent. The next C is completion. We should focus on the goal more than the process. So for example, if we gave our kid an expectation to be met, and ultimately they met the expectation, but the way they got there is not exactly in the way that we wanted them to get there, it might be better to just focus on appreciating the fact that they got it done rather than focusing on how they got it done. Or how timely they got it done. So we should try to give some slack for focusing on completion more than on the process itself. And then finally, the 4th C is compassionate. Remembering, again, like I said before, that no matter how stressful, especially the more stressful the situation is, that our relationship, the quality of our relationship should be a high priority. And we should recognize that nobody's perfect. Certainly, our kids are not going to do things perfectly. Recognize that everybody contributes to making the family strong. There's this really wonderful activity called the family code, where you could sit down with the kids and mother and father together and talk about what's the family mission statement, or what's our code? What does our family stand for? And you go around the family and you have each child and mother and father give a sentence or a word or two that really demonstrate, in your opinion, what our family represents and what it stands for. And you put that down on a nice big oak tag. And you have the artistic person in the family create a nice sign out of that, and that represents your banner, the family mission statement or code. And then some of the other family assets are adapting to challenges, and remembering that when resiliency, that's one of the topics that's oftentimes discussed when we're studying trauma and we're studying the stresses of kids. Resiliency is the idea that there's strength amidst adversity and challenge, that we have the ability as human beings, or our children have the ability to bounce back and to deal with stress and to cope with challenge and to be able to go with the flow but stay upright emotionally, psychologically. That when we band together in times of stress as a family, instead of trying to deal with our stresses individually and apart, then we raise the likelihood of our family being able to be resilient and raising our children to be resilient. Very, very often what happens is parents are not on the same page about a situation and how it should be approached or how to deal with a specific kid, and that should be a priority. That mother and father need to be on the same page, and that if they're not on the same page, they don't know how to get on the same page, that they go for some help in how to get there. because you can't possibly expect the family to be able to cohesively, consistently, and effectively flow from parents that are sort of running the ship and not really effectively being the co-pilots together. And then there's also some other family assets in terms of neighborhood, connecting to community, being able to help our children understand the value of volunteering, of giving back, exposing them, for example, to some of the opportunities here in the neighborhood from the JCC, or, for example, my kids' yeshiva, they have the class go to Tomchei Shabbos. Things like that are so important. On Hanukkah, when there's a toy drive, having kids be in charge of picking out a toy, for example, to be able to donate to tzedakah, and being able to expose our kids to the idea that they should appreciate what they have, and also that there are others out there that don't, and that they could be in a position of helping, and in a position of giving. I'm just monitoring my time. I can go on all night, but Rabbi Horowitz is here, so are you going to be speaking? Okay. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'll be here afterwards for the question and answer.
Thank you, Dovid. As I said, I took notes. I like a lot of the ideas. One of the most challenging things for me about being a social worker or mental health professional is when you're out in public and your own children start throwing tantrums, and people who know you are kind of looking at you, okay, let's see what the expert's going to do now. And what the expert does, at least this expert, is praise. Please stop. I need to have a parnasa. If you don't stop and I yell, I'm going to lose all my clients. A lot of the suggestions that Dovid gave, I think, are really helpful, and hopefully, Mir Hashem, I'll try to implement some of them. One thing also which I didn't mention, which as a parent I can do as well, is I can call Mask, because Mask actually can be contacted anonymously without giving a name. I don't have to be embarrassed. I might change my voice for Chama so you don't know it's me. And say, when your child is throwing a massive tantrum in Toys R Us and wants 8 toys and you can afford about 1, what do? How do you disappear? Besides for that, I wanted to mention as well that for tonight, for those that don't know, that after the talk is finished with Rabbi Horowitz, and after the question and answer forum, which we're going to have afterwards as well, people have a chance to ask questions to Rabbi Horowitz and to Dovid and to myself. People are entitled to take a book, and the suggested, by Ruchama, there's a table that has a number of different parenting books, all, really well-written books. The suggested donation is $10, but please feel free to take a book. And we thank you for being here. I want to introduce our next speaker, Rabbi Horowitz. I have to say that I have not had the pleasure of hearing Rabbi Horowitz live yet. Although I could tell you that from speaking to some people about tonight's event, I was told by a number of my friends and colleagues that I should be prepared, that I'm in for something special, that he's a wonderful and terrific speaker. I went on his website, and again, I was astounded by the amount of things that Rabbi Horowitz has done, and I can't get to all of them because it's just too long, and my speech will be longer than his and Dovid's combined. But the founder and director of Project Yes, which is a mentoring program amongst a lot of other things that they do, which I wasn't aware of. He's written 2 books himself on parenting. I believe the first book's on parenting as well, Growing with the Parsha, or is that just general? It's okay. So 1 book on self-growth, 1 book on parenting. He's a regular contributor, author to a lot of the periodicals that we read each week or each month, the Jewish Observer, the Jewish Press, Mishpacha Magazine. You'll see his name all over. If you haven't heard of him, if you haven't heard him speak, then I guess you're in for a treat as well, and I want to introduce Rabbi Horowitz. I want to mention this, there is a raffle as well, that if people haven't seen, a chance to make a lot of money.
Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. Thank you for your talk. Where's Ruchama? Thank you very much. I remember when Ruchama walked into David Mandel's office 15 years ago, begging 41 suits around the table and rabbis to please listen and see what we can do to help the kids. She called me once. I said, when you need me, without any other questions. It's really a pleasure to work with her and for the sake of our kids. Can I ask all the guys to move up, please? There's a lot of people standing in the back. Can everybody kind of take all the empty seats, please, so the women can sit? Just come up as far as, there's a lot of empty seats. What are you all standing for? Come on up, guys. Come on up, guys. It's okay, it's good. Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you find the time enjoyable and helpful. There are seats open, ladies. Whatever, I'm not getting involved. Okay, whatever you feel like it. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to talk to you about what can you do to keep your kids at home. I'm talking about when they're adolescents. Just raise your hand if your oldest child is 15 or older, just so I can get a feel. Okay, how many of oldest child 10 or over? Okay, 5 or older? Okay, so you're the ones who can ask me about the parasha questions. And I love this, Hi, Rabbi Horowitz. My son there's 12 parasha questions. He only got 10 right, one a little bit, one less. You think we should take him to counseling? Or we should go for Is this your first child by any chance? What made you say that? Just a guess. I'm sorry, a little joke. Okay, let's get started. Your children, Dr. Twersky, I heard Rabbi Twersky, one of my real heroes, Halavai, we would have listened to him 40 years ago when he begged us to take abuse seriously. We would have a lot less problems today. So he said that parenting is like the roof of a home. And he said that a home, they all look, if you go to a new development, all the homes look beautiful. He says when the first storm hits, maybe I shouldn't say the word storm around here, but when a minor storm hits and it starts raining, then you figure out if they made the roof properly. And the truth of the matter is that whatever you're doing, if you do have young children, what you're doing is you're really setting the stage for adolescence, when the kids grow and find their own lives and make their own futures and do their own thing. And that's it's a very stressful period if you haven't been there yet. It's a time that challenges your family, and that's what Dovid was saying was so important about investing the time when your kids are young to really grow as a family together and to enjoy your family time and to have dinners together. But what I'm going to talk to you about is how to make your house a fun place so that your kids want to hang out there. Lani is daiti, from my own opinion, if I may humbly say, I think it's one of the most important goals that parents can set for their homes. It should be the type of place that kids want to hang out in. Why? Because if they're not going to, as long as they're young, they'll do whatever you tell them to. But once they hit adolescence, if your home is not a place that kids want to hang out in, you'll find yourself parenting a lot less. Your house will be quieter, but you won't know where they are. So, and I'm telling you right after the get-go, it's an incredible challenge because it doesn't come cheap. You wind up giving up your menuchas nefesh, the quiet level, you give up your cleanliness, you give up your privacy, you give up your night's sleep. It's a very different experience if you have the type of home that kids hang out in. But the bracha is that when your children are and you get to parent them and you have a real handle on things, which I think is so important today. It's been important always. Everybody's all bent out of shape about the internet, and it is a very big challenge. I absolutely, certainly is. I'm not minimizing it. But every generation has the challenges. You think it was easier 4 generations ago on the Lower East Side when parents didn't speak the language and the kids did? And we've always had, and in Europe during the Haskalah, there were always challenges. Everyone had challenges. This is ours. We have to deal with our own, but ultimately parenting is the key. And by parenting, what Dovid was speaking about the type of relationship, to try to set yourself up. Would your child come to you if they had a problem? I did a study, a very informal study, in 1998. It was shortly after I started Project S. And I was in Camp Rayam for the summer, and it was just 2 nights before, 2 more days left to camp. And I said, I have all these subjects around me, I have all these teenage boys. Let me do a quick study. I'd love to find out what's going on. So I quickly wrote up a 2-page questionnaire with basic questions I wanted to hear from the kids. And the questions were, what are the biggest problems facing kids today? I took the 5 most common things that parents call me about. My kid's not davening, what should I do? Bad friends. gives me an attitude, whatever the issues of the day were. And I said, what would you suggest? What would you advise parents to do if the kid's not davening? If the kid, by the way, bad friends, they all said, just forget it, over, don't even bother. That was the only one that they said, just tell the parents to just lay off, it's not going to help. I mean, by the way, if you, during Q&A, I can give you some tips, but that was just almost universal. Now, one of the questions that I asked them was, you're about to get into trouble, to whom do you turn for advice? Okay, you're about to get in trouble, you're about to do something wrong, who do you talk it over with? And aside from the 40 or so staff members in camp that I gave the questionnaire to, I spent a little time, I went to a learning camp that had, all the best Bachim in Lakewood, and I went to some of the places where the kids hang out, where there were kids from homes who were no longer observant. I really ran the gamut. So, anybody want to guess the number one response? I'm about to get into trouble. To whom do I turn for guidance? Number one response was?
Rabbi. Friends.
Friends were 2. Very good.
No one.
Who said no one? Go to the head of the class. Very good. Parents were 4. Parents were number 4. 3 were a friend, a Rebbe, not a friend, like a mentor, somebody older, a hip Rebbe that gets it. And 2 was friends. 40% of the kids wrote no one. I'm sorry? And I asked them afterwards, after I read that, I scanned the paper, and I said, so tell me why. And the answers that I got to those questions are really, I encourage you to think of those. We all want our kids to talk to us, but that comes with a price too. That means you have to be tolerant. It means you can't freak out when they tell you things you don't want to hear. It means that you have to really listen, you have to pay attention. Yeah, and all of these things, all the values that you want, and you really, none of them come cheap. And the kids were saying things like, my parents are going to judge me, they don't get it. Why should I disappoint them? One of the kids, it was just adorable. One of the kids said had to have been very significantly at risk. He said, anytime I tell my mother something, she goes like this, and takes out a Tillim. I promise you. He said, what should I aggravate her for, Rebbe? There's nothing she can do for me. Like, I love her. Why should I upset her? And by the way, I humbly suggest that you tell your children, if there's something going on in your life, write it down. If you don't, okay, you can call me. Pull it out of your pocket. Take out the smartphone. But really say something like, if there's something going on in your life, I want you to tell me even if it's going to upset me. I really encourage you this. I can't begin to tell you how many young couples have very, very significant shalom bayis problems or other things or worse. And I asked them, so what do your parents say? Oh, we didn't discuss it with them. So and then you have the specter, chas v'shalom, of something significant like the trauma, like abuse or something like that. And an open relationship with your kids where you can discuss things, you tell them, I really encourage you to say this. If there's something going on, if there's something that's in your life that's upsetting you, please tell me. I want to know even if I'm going to be upset. So those barriers to discussion with children, if you're going to judge, or if you don't get it, or if you're going to criticize them or punish them, you're just not going to you'll get, how's your day? Fabulous. Okay, great. Line up with everybody else. So I'm going to talk to you about home life, and I'm going to build on some of the things that Dovid said, and we'll both be glad to take your questions. I'm going to speak probably for about, let's say, 15 minutes or so, 10, 15, 20, and then, is that right, Gia? No. And then I'll take some questions. For the last 3 minutes, 4 minutes, I'm going to speak to you about child safety and what are the things that you could do at a very practical level to keep your children safe from abuse and from predators. So the culture of your home that Dovid spoke about your family having values. I want to talk about what does this mean? Your children. Rabbi Sher Zechatzad Guracha, I had the schus of working with him only for a few months before he passed away. He actually edited a Project Yes ad from his deathbed, like 8 days before he died. It was just amazing. His secretary called me up, Rabbi Sher, and said, you should change these, like a little letter, this and that. He was just so amazing. It's a chaval, I didn't get to spend more time with him. So, Rabbi Sher used to say that every institution is an elongated shadow of one individual. Okay? Buildings have culture to it. I don't mean literally buildings, but institutions. If you go to certain yeshivas, there's a certain flavor. And to have that culture in your home, that family counts, and that we care for each other, and that our time is valuable. So you get to do this. I'm just going to give you some practical examples of what Dovid was speaking about teaching your children that this is a value. You know, turning off your phone, like you mentioned, turning off your phone during dinner is a statement that I want to be here right now, and I'm here at the moment. If you're interested, there's some really great research by the Center for Alcohol and Substance Abuse. It was started by a fellow named Joseph Califano, and he was a cabinet minister under Reagan, and he was trying to figure out how to lower drug use. And they did some really great studies, not in Camp Reagan. They had like 1,000 people with all kinds of, double blind, like the whole spiel. But one of the things that they discovered, what stops kids from getting into trouble? And when you deal like Rechama and I, you deal with at-risk kids, everybody's a maven. Nebuch, when there's a problem, anybody can tell you exactly why it happened. The only problem is when you put a few of them together in a room and you listen to what they say, it sounds like a great debate. Listen, he's one of 10 kids. His parents couldn't look at him. What do you expect? He's an only child. His parents was his father's a Rosh Hashiva. Impression he's on Tata's an Amuritz. So like the parents are loaded. They're rich. So of course he's spoiled. There's no parnasa at home, right? So it sounds like a great debate. Everybody has their own spin on why. So they were saying, so what is it that makes and what they discovered year after year is that involved parents who knew what the kids were doing, who were involved in the children's lives. The research showed that they were 1/4 as likely to get into trouble as parents who were hands-off. And they actually asked them questions. If you're interested, I think it's casacolumbia.org. You just do a Google search for Center for Alcohol and Substance Abuse. They did some fascinating studies, and some of them actually became public ad campaigns, parenting to anti-drug or dinners. They discovered that families that have dinners together more than 6 or 7 times a week had virtually no drug use, no matter where they were. It means the families that sat together at dinner. And I know you work in the city, I imagine, I saw that draft. So let me tell you how it works. If you're only home for Shabbos, make your Shabbos meal count. It's great if you can do this. If you work locally, it's great. Turn your life off for 15 minutes and have dinner with the kids. If not, make your Shabbos count. But your statement to the kids is that this is a value. This is important to us, and you express it. It's little things. You'd be shocked. Look, Kananahar, we have 4 married children and a 17-year-old who runs the house now. And we're doing like adolescence all over again. But the kids grow up before you turn around, and you listen to them as adults come back. And my wife and I always look at each other and say, oh my God, they listened. You hear back some of the things. You hear some of the things that you stressed with them. And the centrality of family, we're family. We celebrate things together, we mourn losses together, we comfort each other when we go through difficult times. The kids really pick up on this. I'll tell you just a couple of small things that I did at home. We have 2 boys, 2 girls that are married, and so they were all within a 6-year periods. The boys hit adolescence a year or 2 after the girls. So basically, all 4 became teenagers like at the same month. I'm sorry for those of you who are going through it. It was just a girl like us. We had 4 cars. I was constantly hitching because I never got to have a car. The cars were always like no gas. I used to leave Post-its on the dashboard of the car. E does not stand for excellent. You have to have a sense of humor. You have to roll with the punches. But the boys were away for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, which don't get me started. I don't get that whole thing, but they didn't get to see each other as much as I wanted to, as I would have liked them to. So what I started doing, first of all, when all the kids were home, I would really spring for a fancy bottle of wine. That was don't ask me why. I just said I wanted them to know that it was valuable to me. So if, instead of whatever it is, we bumped up 10, 15, not like Jerry, but, we had So another thing I started with the kids, guys, I don't want to get you in trouble, but when the children were all home, again, they were all adolescents already, and our 17-year-old at the time was like 5, 6, she was giving the kids dating advice, you know, she was like, listen, she's growing up in a house of adults. But I used to have, if they sat with each other, if they sat and enjoyed each other's company, I would clean and serve and clean off the table. My wife and kids sat at the table, and I did everything. I did not let any kids, I didn't let my wife get up, I didn't let the kids get up. I said, as long as you're talking and you're enjoying each other's time, that's my contribution to your family time. It also, I mean, I have ADD, I couldn't sit still that long, it was a whole different thing. But really, it was a statement that I made to them that this is valuable, and I'm putting some skin in the game. True story, our oldest daughter became a Kala, and 8 years